It's 6:30 a.m. on August 6, 2014, and the Jackson and Lansing Railroad is just about to depart C.P. Jackson on the now state-owned Michigan line. The railroad was created in 2010 after Norfolk Southern agreed to lease the Lansing Secondary to the Adrian and Blissfield subsidiary for a period of 20 years with the option to purchase the line after the lease expired. The Jackson and Lansing, reporting mark JAL, uses two classic GP9 locomotives to pull their trains between the two namesake cities. In 1864, the Jackson, Lansing, and Saginaw Railroad was formed, and the railroad line was built from Jackson to Lansing, a total of 47 miles between 1864 and 1865. In 1865, the portion from Jackson to Lansing was opened, and in 1866, the line to Lansing was complete. 2 years later, in 1867, the company purchased a portion of the Amboy, Lansing, and Traverse Bay Railroad, which ran from Lansing to Owasso and began the construction of an extension onto Saginaw. In 1868, the JL&S constructed a Grand Rapids branch, which would reach the namesake city by the next year. The railroad was called the Grand River Valley Line and branched off at Rives Junction in northern Jackson County, which would be the next location we caught Jackson and Lansing train JL1. As built, this segment was capable of 59-mile-an-hour passenger service and 39-mile-an-hour freight operations since the line wasn't signaled. The Grand River Valley was actually a subsidiary of the Michigan Central Railroad, itself under control of the New York Central. The Michigan Central formally merged the Grand River Valley into its system in 1916. By 1870, trains were running regularly from Jackson to Saginaw. During the same year, the railroad built further from Saginaw to Winona, now known as West Bay City, and on north as far as Pine County. The next year, in 1871, it was completed through White Feather, Worth, Standish, Deep River, Sterling, Dunham, and as far north as Wells, a village named after a prominent lumberman in the area. The next year, in 1872, the railroad was built north to Culver. As soon as the railroad reached Wells and Culver, the lumber company in each of the villages built logging railroads west to the Molasses River and east to the Rifle River, often using Shay locomotives to do the hauling. The main line of the Michigan Central Railroad ran onto West Branch. Another span was built east from Culver to Shearer, which was north of Militia in Clayton Township, near the county line. Other railroads crisscrossed Clayton, Mason, and Western Turner Township. When the railroad came, this region grew fast. It was organized into Moffett Township in 1874. Alvin N. Culver was its first supervisor. Patrick Reardon, who came from Cork, Ireland, the Clives, the Teachants, the Estes, and many others settled there. The villages of Wells and Culver had post offices, stores, and mills before Alger came into existence. As one can see, the Jackson, Lansing, and Saginaw was a very important railroad to the growth of the northern Michigan lumber boom. In Jackson, the line was double-tracked from just north of the Pearl Street Interlocking Tower in the downtown area to Rives Junction. However, before reaching Rives, the now Michigan Central-owned JL&S would have to cross the Grand Trunk and Western at the location known as MAL Junction. MAL was a Michigan Central term and stood for the Michigan Airline, the name under which the original Grand Trunk and Western was built. The Grand Trunk and Western called the location MC Crossing for Michigan Central. The Grand Trunk reached Jackson in 1883 and operated 2 daily freight trains and 2 daily passenger runs between Jackson and Pontiac. The Grand Trunk operated in the Jackson area for 92 years before the rails were removed in 1975. Until the late 1960s, MAL interlocking was controlled by a tower operator. By that time, the tower operator was phoned by Grand Trunk and Western's crew by way of trackside phone. He could then drive out to the tower, give the train permission to enter Jackson, and stay there until the train was finished switching the Grand Trunk yard in town. For over 100 years, passenger service was an everyday occurrence on the JL&S line. However, by 1950, service was reduced to 1 train to Lansing and 1 train to Grand Rapids and back, usually powered by a Budd RDC car. In the early 1960s, when the U.S. interstate highway system had made traveling by car far much more convenient than train, the service ceased. In 1968, the New York Central Railroad and the Pennsylvania Railroad merged, forming the Penn Central Railroad, causing the Michigan Central subsidiary to cease to exist. Until 1976, the Penn Central operated trains over this historical line. However, deferred maintenance caused this line to deteriorate. What was once 59-mile-an-hour rail became a slow 30 miles an hour by the mid-70s and stayed that way until it was again brought down to 25 miles an hour in the mid-80s. Under the Norfolk Southern, the track became so badly maintained, a 10-mile-an-hour speed was slapped on. In 1976, the government-owned Consolidated Rail Corp., also known as Conrail, gained control over the JL&S main line. The Grand Rapids branch, which connected with the JL&S at Rives, was subsidized by Conrail until 1982 from Rives to Eaton. At that time, a short-line hauler by the name of the Kent, Barre, and Eaton Connecting Railway maintained ownership from Grand Rapids to Vermontville, Michigan, but was completely abandoned on October 15, 1983, due to a decline in business and poor management. At that time, just before abandonment, the rails had deteriorated to a point of having a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit imposed. Sadly, Conrail crews had difficulty maintaining even that speed due to the poor condition of the tracks. Today, the only portion that remains is located in Charlotte, which is now owned by the Adrian and Blissfield under the subsidiary line, the Charlotte Southern. The Charlotte Southern operates a monthly dinner train and has one freight customer, a grain elevator, which is located 2 miles from downtown Charlotte. The Adrian and Blissfield's Lapeer Industrial crew often handles this job when needed. The JL&S line, which was called the Lansing Secondary by Conrail, was still a thriving business with General Motors and Oldsmobile in Lansing. In contrast, the northern portion of the line had such little business that it was not included in the original Conrail system and remained under ownership of Penn Central's parent company, Penn Central Transportation. The rails were removed a few weeks after the Conrail takeover between Lansing and the Bay City area. Conrail operated one train each way from 1976 through 1999 for all but a couple of years. The train operated under various IDs and symbols over the years, often changing every 3 years. The list of train symbols will be included in the video description. Because of the decline in business on the line, Conrail was considering abandoning the track at Wicks, a location south of Mason named for the Wicks Lumber Company. However, this was put on hold due to the talk of Conrail being taken over by Norfolk Southern and CSX in 1999. In 1998, RSDC Manufacturing opened a plant in Holt for processing steel coil. The business didn't really pick up until after the Conrail takeover. Norfolk Southern called the daily train by the same name for about 6 months. Then it became B28 during the week and B36 on Sundays. After the Norfolk Southern takeover, the Lansing Secondary saw a daily train for about 9 years. From 2008 through 2010, Norfolk Southern operated 3 trains per week, often having 2 GP38-2 locomotives and 10 cars or less on average. Many of the shippers had ceased receiving deliveries by rail due to the poor service. In October of 2010, Norfolk Southern decided to lease the line to the Jackson and Lansing Railroad. Its reporting mark is derived from the original Michigan State Prison, located next to the tracks in downtown Jackson. The prison was known for being the largest walled prison in the world for many years. Others theorized it could be an acronym for the counties which the railroad runs through. In other words, the Jackson and Ingham Line. Since acquiring the line, the jail has increased business by over 250%. Every morning, train JL1 delivers loads to Norfolk Southern's Jackson Yard, averaging 30 to 40 car-long trains. After switching cars for about an hour or so, the train will depart Jackson, headed for Mason, where the railroad has recently built a new shop facility. The next crew will switch out cars, and an afternoon crew will often work the jobs around the Lansing metropolitan area. The jail has access to 5 yards: Jackson Yard in Jackson, South Yard, which is south of Lansing and is primarily used for car storage, Saginaw Yard, which is their main yard and is also used mainly for car storage, Hollow Yard, CSX's Enzel Yard, where they interchange several times a week, and an interchange track with CN. At one time, South Yard had a tower and an engine house. The Saginaw yard was once used for storing cars that hauled auto parts. Since the plants are gone, both yards are virtually empty. The jail's biggest customer is RSDC in Holt, which receives an average of 10 cars each morning. Michigan Packaging and Cat Feeds are the only customers in Mason, while in Lansing, the jail services Hazen Lumber, Lewis Padnos Scrap Metal, and Alro Steel with train LS1. Train Z646 is the CSX symbol for the jail interchange job in Enzel Yard. The Jackson and Lansing Railroad is a prime example of what a short line hauler can do. When a Class 1 can't satisfy the needs of smaller customers on branch lines, Class 3s are often able to step in and rebuild lost relationships between the shipper and the receiver. Thanks for watching Delay and Block Productions. If you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.